they're still in on it. They still think Israel's our ally. They still have, they're still maybe 1 foot in on the organized Jewish lobby. And I'm totally independent of that. I would say that's the distinction between us. And so that's the kind of two-faced, like not direct stuff that I really don't like. Like that makes me not trust him.
Nick Fuentes still has a major beef with both Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, even after sitting down for several hours with the latter in a conversation that led many people to believe that they had squashed their beef. Nick still does. He explains in this clip why and what's at the heart of it. Why does he still maintain bitterness toward both of these individuals? Let's watch. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
It's interesting. Well, first I would say about Trump, he was backed by very specific interests in 2024. And it's sort of interesting because he was not even their first choice. In 2022, when I had dinner with him, it was coming off the midterm elections. So the midterms were early November 22. We had the dinner a few weeks later. And at that time, all of the donors were running for the exits. Like Trump could not raise any money in 22. He declared his candidacy for re-election in 24, but he had no donors. All the donors wanted DeSantis. Yeah. DeSantis was their guy. Specifically, I'll name names. Ken Griffin from Citadel, big Wall Street guy. Silicon Valley, Elon Musk. He launched Ron DeSantis' campaign on Twitter, on a Twitter space. Yeah. Elon Musk and David Sachs from PayPal Mafia. And Miriam Adelson. She was a huge backer of DeSantis early on, too. So you had the trifecta. Wall Street, Silicon Valley, Israel lobby. They were all behind DeSantis. In 2023, he announced, and it was a total flop. And they recognized that. By the summer of 23, I think he announced in May, he totally fell off, and they jumped for Nikki Haley.
Yeah.
And there was this talk that Nikki Haley would win the New Hampshire primary, and then she'd win South Carolina, her home state, and then she could be the nominee. She would be the Republican, if you could imagine. Same deal. Miriam Adelson was behind her. Ken Griffin. All these people then went behind Haley. She lost in New Hampshire. Or maybe she won. I forget exactly, but she didn't win by a lot. They were forced to accept Trump.
Yeah.
And in May or June of last year, Miriam Adelson made the check out to Trump, and Elon went behind Trump, and Tim Mellon, the banker, all these people eventually went behind Trump. And
yeah, this is mostly correct, though I will say that Miriam Adelson and her husband, Sheldon Adelson, were among Trump's biggest donors in his first term, and I believe in the 2020 election cycle too. So he did have their backing in 2 previous administrations, and ultimately he had their backing in this last one. Now, is it true that Miriam Adelson knew DeSantis well? Yeah, she dined with him. There's, a big story about mega donors, including Miriam Adelson, dined with DeSantis and Israel of all places. What a coincidence, right? But she did seem to be in line with Trump, so I don't think it's exactly right to say that she was backing financially DeSantis and Haley. She always really backed Trump for the most part throughout Trump's 3 presidential runs, and I don't think it's true that all the donors were behind DeSantis, though many of them were. That is fair.
Trump effectively sold out. Like that, it could not be more clear. He took a ton of money from the billionaires, and all you have to look at is the small dollar contributions. In 16, the small dollar contributions were like 60% of his total haul. In 24, it was like 30%. So it was like totally inverted. And he got tons of billionaire money. So I would say that when somebody is selling out, it's very obvious because they're getting paid. Me, I'm under attack by all these people. J.D. Vance hates me. Peter Thiel is trying to destroy me because I'm against Vance, which is his guy in 24. Elon Musk is always attacking me on Twitter.
Yeah.
The Israel lobby hates me. They're trying to get me banned. At all their meetings over the past few weeks, they're saying, we need to pass anti-Semitism laws to keep this guy. So, very clearly I'm against Wall Street, Silicon Valley, Israel lobby. But as far as the Tucker and Candace thing is concerned, there's something very interesting there. There's something subtle there. And I've been talking about this for a long time. If you watch me, I'm saying very clearly that our issue is that we have an organized Jewry in the world, which is to say that it's not every Jewish person that's alive, obviously.
Yeah.
But there are Jewish people as a group are very organized. They have federations, congresses, fraternities, like they're extremely networked and organized. And with organization comes collective action, right?
Yeah.
If you're one person, you can't make a difference. But if you have 100 people in a membership group and you're all rich or you're all lawyers or judges, now you got some juice. Now you got a little play. Now imagine this on a global scale. Jewish people are like the richest ethnicity in America, overrepresented in Harvard, Columbia, Yale, whatever. Super powerful. Now, that's fine. I mean, God bless them. Good for them. They have a very strong identity and they're very successful. I think largely because they're smart, they're educated. That's a big part of it. But they also help each other. Here's the issue. They put their tribe ahead of their nation. And that can be a conflict of interest. Now, that's what I say.
Just want to note, though, that seems to be what Nick does under some people's interpretations when he puts white people's interest above his nation. Now, he will say that that's intrinsically connected. You know, we should be a white nation. We are always a white nation, and talk about that. But he seems to believe that the remedy to this is not just to say that's immoral, but to say that not only is that not immoral, that should be embraced, but by white people. But so he's pinning blame on something that he himself wants to do when it comes to whites and white organization and racialism on the basis of white identity politics. Just want to say that that's not noteworthy, because to me that's a little bit hypocritical if you're asking me, regardless of what you think about that topic. It's either you reject it wholesale or just embrace it, but then you can't say the opposition in his mind, you know, organized Jewry as he says it, is to blame if you want to adopt those same tactics.
What Tucker and Candace say is completely different. They come out and they say, no, we don't have a problem like that. And we don't even have a problem with Israel per se. They say we have a problem with specific policies of the Israeli government and Netanyahu.
Not even remotely so when it comes to Candace Owens. She has skewered Israel in every possible way, not just Netanyahu, not just this government, saying that she would rather cut a limb off than support Israel ever again. It's not confined to those parameters. Tucker, much more so, I would say that is fair. Tucker actually says he frankly likes Israel. He doesn't like the Israeli government, and he hates, the stern connection between the United States and Israel. But you could not get away with any reasonable person looking what Candace Owens says about Israel and come to that conclusion in my mind.
And when Candace asked me to do her show, was this a big reunion? Did we have a great time? No. She tried to put the screws in me, and she interrogated me and said, do you hate Jewish people for being Jewish? Do you hate Dave Smith because he's Jewish? And I said, no. I said, I don't hate any.
You gave me Dave Smith's number, by the way.
What's that?
You gave me Dave Smith's number.
I did, yeah. And I like Dave.
Yeah.
I love Dave, actually. He's a great guy. But what they were effectively saying is, because you talk about Jewishness, you're an anti-Semite. And I said, look, I don't hate them, and I don't hate individuals, or I'm a Christian. I don't hate anybody, actually. And in particular, Christians have a special respect for Jews. We call them a witness people because they witnessed the revelation by God in the Old Testament and the Passion of Christ. Anyway, so she brings me on the show and says, you talk about Jews, you're an anti-Semite. The real issue is like the neocons in Israel. And I said, that's just BS. Clearly it's bigger than that.
Okay, so here's where I'll push back a little bit. First of all, I don't think he's interpreting that interview the way a reasonable person would. Don't take my word for it. Actually watch the Candace Owens and Nick Fuentes interview. What she was arguing is that there are a lot of Jews that are actually really good critics of Israel. Dave Smith being one of them. Of course, there's more. There's Jeffrey Sachs and Norman Finkelstein and Max Blumenthal and others, many of which that Nick has had feuds with publicly so on Twitter. And she was saying, well, doesn't this break the mold? If you're saying that this is just, organized Jewry in the aggregate, that they're all working together on this, doesn't that really actually kind of disrupt that narrative? That is what Candace was saying, and I think it's reasonable pushback. Tucker Carlson used that kind of pushback too. Now, when he's saying that Dave Smith and Candace Owens blame it on the neocons and it goes deeper than that, well, it's no, in a way, the neocons is far deeper than organized Jewry, because the neocons include Christian Zionists like George W. Bush and Donald Rumsfeld and Lindsey Graham and Dick Cheney and all those absurd monsters, blood-soaked monsters that are culpable for this too. So if you blame it on organized Jewry, that is in fact a limited hangout. That is in fact not placing blame where it should be placed on individual perpetrators on an individual basis. You wouldn't be able to blame some Hindu guy that influenced a murder. If a guy murders someone else, you wouldn't be able to just pin it on the Hindu guy if the murderer was Christian. You'd still blame it on the Christian. And so should we in terms of the war on terror and the neocon experiment, which is devastating, and it goes far beyond his parameters, which is just one ethnicity, which didn't even have most of the political power under the neocon regime of Bush.
Then she goes on the show with Tucker, and for 15 minutes they talk about me and say, yeah, he's like David Duke, he's a Fed, he's a real anti-Semite, he's a weird kid in his basement.
They said none of those things out. They didn't say he was David Duke. They did not say he was anti-Semitic. Tucker did at one point say, he's just some gay kid in his basement in Chicago. That is true. Again, watch this. Don't take my word for it. But Nick is trying to interpret this to make him the biggest imaginable victim here. And I think what Tucker said was wrong. But, he wants history to begin that day. But Nick Fuentes called Tucker Carlson a Fed on his March 9th, 2023 episode of America First. So that goes far before what happened then. So Nick is has this constant victimhood ideology, and to some extent it's right. He's been canceled off of almost all social media platforms. His bank accounts have been frozen, things like that. But he's, dishonest in some ways about his interpretation of this, and you just need to watch those clips to be aware of it.
I call out Tucker. Tucker has me on the show. I think it's a good conversation. Now he's going around everywhere and saying, well, I agree with Nick on some things, but not his anti-Semitism and Jew hatred. Oh, so there's that line again. So there's like a triangulation here. Tucker, Candace, me. And it seems like they both brought me on their show to either lecture me or interrogate me or to maybe create space between us and say, no, you're a Jew hater. I'm critiquing Israel's policies. And so there is a gulf between us. But the difference is they're still in on it. They still think Israel's our ally. They still have, they're still maybe 1 foot in on the organized Jewish lobby. And I'm totally independent of that.
It's absurd. Neither Tucker nor Candace has said recently, in recent years and months, that Israel is still our ally. It's just a preposterous statement that's totally dishonest in every single way. And you couldn't, come off saying as much if you actually watched Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens. I think this is Nick being a little bit soft. He's calling it an interrogation when it's just legitimate pushback in terms of some of the things that he said about why their support for the the America First mentality, is legitimate, that they believe that this issue is bad for the United States to pursue too. We just have slightly different reasons for that, and I want to push back at your explanations for it. Nick's calling himself a victim, or that's an interrogation. It just wasn't. It's reasonable pushback. Dave Smith did the same thing too, by the way. There's gulfs in between what they think to some extent on this issue, even though they ultimately have similar policy prescriptions for it. So it's feuds like this and Nick constantly driving wedges between the right that has a lot of people thinking, well, this must be why he's a Fed. And I don't know whether he's a Fed or not, but this and, saying things similar to what Ray Epps did on January 8th at the Capitol have a lot of people wondering. They still do to some extent. Again, I don't have the proof to suggest that. I'm just saying it's attitudes like this that make it seem like, hey, what would a Fed do? They'd try to put wedges in the dissident right, the anti-Israel dissident right, at a time where the American right is starting to reject the Israel First mentality.
I'd say that's the distinction between us.
So you'd say that, they're the Feds then?
Yeah. Yes.
It's crazy. But you had a good convo with Tucker.
Yeah, I did.
Obviously the Candace thing went a bit different. The conversations that you guys had, I know I guess, I don't know if he has dinner with all his guests prior, but the conversations you had there, obviously a little more personal, wasn't on the internet, obviously. What was that like? Did you feel like it was weird or like?
It was very weird. It felt like a cop interrogating me, and I knew it would be like that. Like, so we're talking, and it's sort of like, he was friendly, but friendliness can be authentic or inauthentic. But there was, like, I would say, an intensity there. There was a tension, even though it was friendly. There was like a deep tension masked by friendliness. And so we'd be talking and laughing, and, he's doing his laugh. Oh, he's doing that. And then he'd be laughing 1 second and then stop on a dime and say, so you took money from Peter Thiel. And you've seen him do it on his show. He's got like this agility, this like range. And by the way, that's not true. So, but he'd be laughing. Oh, haha, that's true. You took money from Peter Thiel. That's like a real thing that he said to me. And I said, what? No, I didn't take money from Peter Thiel. He goes, oh, okay, I believe you.
Okay, so I just recently watched their interview together, and he did not say that to Nick Fuentes. Peter Thiel's name did not occur in that entire interview. Now, it could be a possibility that they talked off air about Peter Thiel, and that's something he said to him. But we don't have corroboration of that. And if you guys think I'm wrong, find it, let me know. Find the clip and let me know down below. Paste the clip down below, because I don't think that there's any corroboration of it. Doesn't mean it didn't happen. But I'm just saying that that wasn't part of their interview. I would have picked up on that and remembered that. I study Peter Thiel and Palantir and the PayPal Mafia as part of a lot of other my stories. I would have liked to cover that, but that didn't come up in the actual interview.
I said, who'd you hear that from? He goes, oh, he told me.
He told him?
Yeah. I was like, no, that never happened. He's like, oh, okay. And it was sort of like, and he was throwing, there was like a lot of weird questions he was asking me about obscure people that like a massive audience wouldn't know, but that if you're in this political space, you would know, or maybe problem people or disruptive people. And so I would say that it was sort of an uncanny, uneasy kind of dinner.
I'm curious about who he means by that too. People that, people steeped in this subject would know, but not a mass audience. I'm not aware of that either. Maybe I need to rewatch a third time to see what he's getting at, but I don't pick that up from the interview. Do you guys know? If you're watching this, let me know in the comments who you think that Nick is describing in their interview. I just don't think that was injected into their interview. And again, it could have happened off the camera, but then we can't really say one way or the other. I guess we just take his word for it.
And I wasn't talking about it, but then the New York Times called me and said, hey, Tucker said you were really nervous at the dinner. Is that true? I said, well, I thought he was going to kill me. So yeah, I was a little nervous. Like I didn't think he was going to blow my plane up on the way there or something. But yeah, so it was sort of strange. And what I don't like about it is we had this conversation and everybody saw the conversation and said, oh, it was kind of just like a standard interview. It wasn't very intense or anything. It wasn't contentious, but we all saw it. Then he goes on every show for the next few weeks, and every single one calls me an anti-Semite. Every single one. He goes and says,
he did not. On the 1819 podcast, he didn't do that. On the Sean Ryan podcast, he didn't do that. So I think this is another uncharitable interpretation of things Tucker has said in those interviews. Those are the two ones that come up in my head that Tucker has done since then. There might be more. On the Sean Ryan one, there was a part in which he stopped, and it wasn't related to Nick per se, but he did say, I reject all the anti-Semitic stuff. It's terrible. But you can't deny that Nick Fuentes says a lot of true things. So I guess you can interpret that as if he's saying that Nick says some anti-Semitic things, but at the same time, he's not calling Nick an anti-Semite. In none of those interviews does he do that. Again, show me down below if you want to refute this, if you think I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. He hasn't gone on and just called Nick Fuentes an anti-Semite in those interviews.
So, well, I don't agree with his anti-Semitism, his Jew hatred. And it's like, what is that? He goes on on Megyn Kelly. He says, I talked to one of the biggest purveyors of anti-Semitism to convince him to stop being anti-Semitic. Is that what everybody saw in that interview? Because that's not what I heard. That wasn't my discussion, at least as far as I know. And so that's the kind of two-faced, like not direct stuff that I really don't like. Like that makes me not trust him.
Okay, interesting. I can't speak to the Megyn Kelly interview because I'm not familiar with it. That one I might have missed, but I'm going to go try to find that and see if that's what he actually said, that in referencing Nick, I talked to one of the mass purveyors of anti-Semitism. I'll see. I'll keep my mind open on that. But what I can say is on the 1819 podcast and Sean Ryan, he didn't do that. But there it is. There's the beef. This is why a lot of people suspect that there is a psyop on the part of Fuentes to drive a wedge between dissident forces on the American right. Now, I know people think this about Tucker Carlson, too. They say, hey, his interview with Candace Owens was indicative of that. But again, history didn't begin that day. Nick has been doing this toward Tucker since at least the beginning of 2023. Maybe before that. I didn't follow Nick Fuentes close before that. But Nick wants to just kind of be the perennial victim here. And there's things I think he says that are entirely accurate. The previous reaction video to him I thought was essentially entirely accurate for the most part. But I do think he has some problems with holding personal animosities and bitterness and using that in a way that isn't helpful if your really end goal is to diminish the Israel lobby's influence in the United States, to end the Israel first mentality and the connection to this bloodthirsty genocidal regime and getting the U.S. pulled into its wars. You know, if that's really your true goal, I don't know if you'd attack people that disagree with you just on the matter of why not to support Israel. Like, if it was any other subject, fine, have those debates. But ultimately, when your policy prescription is the same, it rubs a lot of people the wrong way if you're saying that, yeah, you oppose Israel, but you don't oppose Israel for the right reasons. That just comes off as saboteurish, so to speak. And I think that there's potentially some truth to that, but what do you guys think? Do you think I'm right about that? Do you think Nick's right about that? Let me know in the comments below. Please produce arguments. If you want to refute anything of what I said with clips, please drop them down there. But I think that I have a charitable interpretation of this from following all three of them. Let me know down below what you think. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Also, if you like this video or my take, please consider joining as a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button below. And if you do that, you can get immediate access to all my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube, including the members only ones. You'll be able to see those videos before they go live to the general public, and I really appreciate your support if you give it to me in that way. And also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. It'll shoot you off to a site. You plug in your email in the little box there, and I'll send you a free copy via PDF of that book, free of charge, no obligation, just because I appreciate you watching. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.